Sylvester is associated of the Center of Post-Digital Culture in Coventry University. His research focus on investigation to engaging, empathic, and empowering experience through the lens of playful and gameful design practice. I would like to highlight also Sylvester is a co-founder of multi-award winning GameChangers initiative, which has been adopted globally in some countries, Malaysia, and expanded to Vietnam, Indonesia, and towards responding to the sustainable development goals. So Sylvester has published recently a book, Gaming Science in Hybrid Learning Space, which provides insight into the research and practice of a powerful game design with a focus on hybrid education. Moro has published more than 100 publications, and recently this game science in hybrid learning spaces provide insights of research and the practice of powerful game design in education, as I told you. So for all these reasons, and because Sylvester is a nice and excellent colleague, it's a privilege to have him here with us, and I will pass the word. And the stage is yours, Sylvester.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my slides so that you can see what I'm going to talk about. First and foremost, thank you very much for inviting me to share some insights from my research, development and practice, especially when we look at how can we create experiences that are going to be empowering, and learning from playful and game-based design methods that can inform the way that we can create experiences that are going to be meaningful and purposeful. And thank you very much for the introduction. And I will also sort of just briefly talk about, you know, where I'm from and the context within which our work has developed. As you can see on the screen, I'm officially under the DigiMedia Learning Lab. So what we do is we are working with staff and colleagues across the university, trying to figure out how can we reconfigure learning in a more impactful way by looking at playful and gameful methodologies. And I'm also part of the post-digital research center, where we are actually looking at how we can create experiences in a world where the digital is very much embedded in our daily lives. The digital is not a separate entity anymore in terms of the media that we are accessing, but how can we learn from engaging design practices to help us inform the design of new experiences or solutions, so on and so forth. So our research is very much around this. And one of the key initiatives that we are running, and I co-founded as introduced previously, GameChangers. So GameChangers was set up in 2015 when we realized that practitioners are not as confident to create new resources, for example, game resources or playful resources, and it is important to encourage practitioners, for example, educationers, so on and so forth, to be able to co-create and co-design different experiences in a more fun way. So this is where GameChangers came from. So I'm gonna just play a video so that at least that will give you a bit of an introduction to the initiative and what it is trying to achieve and what it has achieved as well.
We believe that everybody can play and create games. We believe in games for learning and learning through play. The GameChangers initiative is an award-winning practice-based research program focusing on the design and implementation of frugal, playful, and gameful learning experiences. As a collection of researchers, developers, and practitioners, the GameChangers community uses games and game-like solutions as a medium for expression, learning, and practice across all levels of education. Our aim is to make game creation and game literacy more culturally open and accessible to learners and educators internationally. Working with international partners, GameChangers expands and broadens its impact through a wide range of initiatives. Working with educators and learners in marginalised communities, we take a pragmatic and empathic approach to the design and implementation of playful and gameful interventions. Creative and playful spaces enable a myriad of disciplines to join forces and co-create playful and gameful pedagogies. Creativity and resilience are at the core of what we do. Over the years, our team have fostered a frugal approach to education innovation, merging playful learning with creative problem solving to deliver innovative, practical, and sustainable pedagogic practice within our projects. We embrace openness and believe everyone should be able to benefit from our efforts. To that end, we endeavour to make all our resources and research open access, complete with guides and examples to help you reuse and remix for yourself with the power of Creative Commons. So why not come and join us and become a game changer?
So as you can see, our approach is very holistic and pragmatic in the sense that we are, of course, very much influenced and inspired by technology. New technologies are coming out, but most importantly, we are interested in how we can actually look at using different types of digital medias and so forth in a more purposeful way. So most importantly, starting from the beginning in terms of trying to understand more about how can we understand the different gaps or the different needs. What do we care about and what can we do about it? How we can do it? Are there any different types of technology, whether it's analog, whether it's digital, or whether it is hybrid, that are going to, in a way, enable different types of experiences that we want to create? So we find that it is important to be able to onboard anyone into the understanding of the fact that we are using technology is because there has to be a purpose to it. So in order to get everyone to co-create experiences is to onboard them into the thinking that let's talk about the needs, let's talk about the gaps, and let's talk about what do we care about before we actually include something that is more sophisticated. So the approach has won various awards, and recently we won the QS Reimagine Education Award within the category of learning sciences, especially the work that we have done with teachers around the world. So the way that we're looking at our work is very much around branching inquiries. But what I mean by this is the fact that there are so many different aspects of playful and gameful design approaches or technologies that we would like to explore. So by looking at different projects, we are able to, in a way, investigate the various aspects within the many projects that we have run in the past and the projects that we are currently running in different aspects. We have even worked within the farming sector and how we can use game-based methodologies in informing policy and the way policymakers are working with landowners, so on and so forth. So we try to be sector, transdisciplinary, so on and so forth, which I think is important to help us to provide a more holistic view of our research area. And in this case, how can we create experiences using game-based methodologies, so on and so forth. So this is something that we are very much interested in. And most importantly, the question that we always ask is around how do we design engaging, meaningful experiences? What are those experiences? What will we nurture? Transferability in terms of whether we are going to use digital games, whether we are going to use certain media. How can the skills or the experience that you have gained from that will be transferred into the real world? How can we impact the society? How can we impact local surroundings, for instance. So experience here, it depends on the needs. It can be health experience, it can be learning experience, it can be social experience, it can be cultural experience. So it is important to think about what do we expect to happen and what do we expect to impact as well. For instance, especially in terms of during the pandemic, digital transformation has been sped up. So everyone in the way has transferred into digital platforms in teaching and learning in all sorts of different ways. And some people are perhaps not well prepared for this, because sometimes we think that by jumping into technology, we will be able to, in a way, replicate or enhance what we intend to achieve within an experience. But if we don't do it purposefully, it might also create certain issues and challenges and widen the divides, because not a lot of people are, have access to high-powered machines as well as high-speed network. So those are the things we need to think about, of the gaps and who are the people that we are working with. So our approach is very much around the remixing play. Remixing, it's like remodeling, it's like repurposing, reusing. How can we learn and get inspirations from play and gameplay? How do we learn from the emotional connection that we have from games? When we are playing with games, we are so emotionally connected, socially connected in so many different ways. The autonomy and agency that we experience when we play games, how can we learn from this and use the same aspects in order to inform new experiences, to inform new solutions, new digital platforms, or all sorts of different things that can be influenced by us trying to understand how do we interact with something, regardless of what that instrument is, or what platforms, or what media, or what devices that we are going to create or reproduce. It's all about the experience around that particular product or solution that we want to create. So this is where we come from. And I'm not sure if you recognize one of the pictures there. The one who is actually playing with us is Sir Ian Livingstone. So he is one of the godfather of the game industry, especially in the UK. So it's nice seeing him, having analog play, which is great. And during the pandemic, games have provided the escapism that most of us need, and he has also introduced social learning, social connection. It has helped people to actually meet new people within the context of online gaming, and also has helped a lot in terms of addressing mental health. So it's quite interesting to see how we can actually learn from the experiences that people have actually gone through during the pandemic, which is interesting and something that we are exploring as well. And the question that we always ask is, how do we encourage or facilitate and track any change or impact through gameplay? Because when we look at play research generally, games is just a particular manifestation of play, but it's not in its totality. And one thing that is good about using games as an instrument is the fact that it will allow us to be able to perhaps measure what is happening within that game experience, and will allow us to be able to understand more about how we can provide the right support to those who are playing that particular games, for instance. And especially when we talk about play and games for serious purposes. And there is no fixed formula to this. Of course, there are so many studies that have talked about the scientific validity of the efficacy of using games, but there is no such thing as a standard methodology or a standard formula that will allow us to create something. It is important for us to be able to understand what what would make games so effective in a more granular level, meaning that how do we understand in terms of connection between games and the learning, games and health, games and what are the different types of design aspects that we can actually include in an activity. So we will be more informed. We would roughly know what's the ingredients in that particular experience, so that we will be able to, in a way, evaluate it, measure it, track it, and be able to improve it as we go along. Of course, it's like how do we do this? One of the things that we are looking at is very much around thinking like a game designer. So when we think about games, we think about firstly the mechanics of those games. What are the rules of those games? What are the actions that you need to do? What are the objects within that particular game itself? Whether it is time-based, whether what are the winning conditions, what actions you need to do within a particular game in order to progress, so on and so forth. And in terms of the dynamic in terms of the context, in terms of the stories that is bringing all the mechanics together. For example, you need to jump to a certain level in order to collect something, and then you would jump down and you will move on to the next level. What is the context of that? What does it mean? What is the context of you jumping on that particular level and the things that you are collecting? So the context of the things you are collecting might be able to increase your health, might be able to increase your agility in that particular game. So the context of how the mechanics of those games, the rules of those games can actually help you in terms of understanding how you act and react within a particular game, in terms of the feedback, in terms of the progressions, on and so forth. And one thing that is important is also in terms of the aesthetic of those games. That will be the interface of you and the game, in terms of the interfaces, the interaction, the features. How are you going to interact with it? How does it look like? So those are the things that we will always encourage people to think about when you try to design experiences is informed by games. And we try to simplify this by encouraging people to think about the context first, the context of what you're trying to create. In this case, in the learning aspect, for example, the approach that we introduced at the university here is very much around understanding what are the learning plan, what are the learning objectives, who are the learners, what are the lesson plans, what are the theories that you are going to use, whether it is going to be inquiry-based learning, whether it is going to be experiential learning, and so on and so forth, and what are the outcomes and the measures, and that would inform the dynamics. And then you think about, how can I make it more interesting? How can I divide it into different missions, different quests perhaps? Then you will look at the mechanics, the aesthetics of it, and you're thinking about the dynamics in terms of the narratives, in terms of the user experience design. And then you think, how can I enable this to happen? Is it going to be based on something that is more analog? For example, I can create a role play game, or whether I can create a board game, card games, escape rooms, so on and so forth. Or I can think of something that is more digital. It can be on a digital platform. I can create an RPG game that will allow people to select different scenarios, and they will be able to learn through that experience. Or whether it can be a hybrid, for example, games like Pokemon Go, or whether it is going to be XR, using VR, Oculus Quest 2 type thing. So you can be as sophisticated as you want, but at the end of the day, the context matters, and the enablers will help you to reach the objective of that. And this has been experimented with our own colleagues at university, as well as students, as well as designers, working together to think of how they can actually address the challenges in terms of language learning, in this case, Italian. So they think about what are the different measures, what are different learning objectives they wish to address, what would be the dynamics in terms of the context, the story around that, And then they were inspired by Pokemon Go at that particular time. They're saying that, oh, we want to create something where you can actually walk around the city and then you will be able to learn the language at the same time. So they managed to create this. And they use an open source platform which is called Tailblazer, because we've got a connection with the group who created it at the MIT. So we are using where they use this to create this. So the game has been used for teaching Italian language at the university at a particular time, and they are actually looking at different ways to enhance and advance this as well. So this is an example of how people who are not familiar with games, they are able to create something that is useful for their context. And of course, the research we're doing is very much around transdisciplinarity. How can we learn from different disciplines, different sectors in informing the different types of experiences that we want to create? It is important to understand, for example, if you want to create something that is suitable for the farming sector, for example, you need to understand more about the discipline. What are the different dynamics in terms of policy making and the way that people interact with one another? Can we learn from that experience and inform the design of different activities within that particular game, or game-based experiences or playful experiences that we wish to create? So this is something that has informed some of the previous work that we have done, a collaboration with our colleagues at Harriet Ward University, where we're looking at how can we map the granular relationship between learning and gaming. There are two totally different disciplines, in terms of game-based methodologies and also pedagogies. How can we map this? How do we understand more about the interconnection and the relationships between this? So this is an example of transdisciplinary approach, which has informed the development of so many different games, as I've shown on the screen. These are only 4 different types of games which have been created based on this particular approach, and are many more out there, which we are currently trying to collect information on the impact of this particular approach. As an example here, it's trying to get educators to think about the connection between the learning objectives and the types of learning that should happen within that particular segment of the objective, and what are the game mechanics that could be relevant. For example, here in terms of the objective of to reflect on knowledge and cultural stereotypes, probably we need them to hypothesize, we need them to reflect what are the elements of game mechanics and dynamics that will be able to help us to achieve this, perhaps using story and narrative, using a fantasy sort of approach, so we can think about how do we implement them. So this is just a simple example of how educators have gone through this process. And also during the pandemic, we've got colleagues at university who came to us saying that, oh, we have to teach on themes, but how do you teach sports science, especially in terms of their study skills and whatnot on themes? It's like it's boring. So we say, let's think about how can we reconfigure the learning activity at the speed of need, and the need at this particular time is the use of Teams platform, OneDrive platform. So we started with the same process, started with the learning objectives and what are the different learning mechanics that we would wish to include, which has informed the inspiration for using escape room methodology. And we implemented this and co-designed it with them and tested it with the first cohort of the student, and they have just run it for the second cohort, and they are going to run it for the third cohort. So it shows that it's working. We published this as well in terms of the initial finding that we get. So this shows that the importance of cross-sectorial and cross-disciplinary and transdisciplinary approach in designing experiences at the speed of need. And of course, there are, based on what we've done, there are ongoing projects that is using this particular approach in so many different ways. In this case, in trying to talk about racism and modern slavery. So you can find out more about this. And the approach has also been extended to talk about motivation, trying to understand more about motivation from the self-determination theory perspective. How do we connect this with the gaming aspect and connect this with the learning aspect? Can we learn more about if this gaming approach can improve learning? How did we encourage people to actually engage with it? What are the motivational aspect in terms of self-determination theory, in terms of thinking about autonomy, thinking about competency, so on and so forth. So this is an example of how we can continue to develop the understanding across so many different disciplines that will allow us to be able to be more informed in our design. And of course, when we talk about all this with educators, some of them say that, can you simplify this? Like, how do we start? How do we do it? Because it is important to onboard educators and anyone who are not familiar with games or the process or the research itself, because sometimes we might overload people with different information. So we are interested in the onboarding part of it, which will advance different practitioners into the practice. And once they've gone through the process over and over again, they will be able to master it. So in this case, we're looking at, we give them the options of analog, whether it's analog games, digital games, or whether it is hybrid games using XR or using location-based games. And the process of game making is important, especially when you come together to create something meaningful. And here, the keyword is meaningful. Something that is meaningful to them, something that is addressing the challenge that they are looking at. So this is something that is so important in the process that we have gone through so far. And one of the approaches that we use on board is this flashcards, which is based on remixing play. And the idea is to encourage people to exercise their creativity muscles so that they don't have to feel, because some people feel a bit uncomfortable saying that they don't understand games, they are not gamers. You don't have to be a gamer to be able to understand games, because everyone has played games. Hide and seek is a game. It's a strategy game, if you ask me. So it is something that you can actually learn from. So in this case, what we normally do by using these cards, we have it physically and we also have it online. So we would randomly pick a topic card. For example, here is climate change, and then an inspiration card, which is the game card Pokemon Go. So we get them to think about a game idea quickly in 1 minute. So they have to quickly think about, oh, Pokemon Go, climate change, what can I do? Oh, perhaps I can create something location-based that will allow people to go different parts of the city, and they'll be able to understand more about pollutions, be able to know about recycling, be able to know more about different ways for us to be more climate aware. So perhaps that is an example of an activity that can be created perhaps. And you'll be surprised, there's so many workshops that we have run. Some educators created a game idea in less than 30 seconds. They quickly have an idea, and it was, oh my God, I didn't even think that I could think of an idea that is that good. And we always say that the idea is we are not striving for perfection. We are encouraging people to just be confident and be relaxed and just create game ideas. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can always better it in an iterative way. So after they've gone through that process, then they need to iterate it in terms of making it more specific in terms of what are the actual needs, okay, and then pick different types of mechanics and dynamics and aesthetics of different games, link it between learning and gaming as you have seen before, and then design the prototype, test it, and then iteratively refine it, and then make it better. Because as I said here, nobody is perfect, therefore practice makes better, not perfection, because we always want to improve our practice. So this process has been gone through so many different ways, so many different times. So many people adapted this particular approach, and some of them created digital games, VR games, escape rooms, so on and so forth. For example, some of the different games which have been created, from teacher remix games like a simple hopscotch through to something that is more hybrid, for example, educational escape rooms where they use digital platform, digital media, as well as physical activities in a room, which has also won an award in 2018. And Homeless Monopoly is a very huge, giant sort of map which has been created that has been used by schools in trying to understand more about homelessness and the awareness of the spectrum of homelessness, on and so forth. And the one in the middle, location-based games, which was based on the platform that was a spin-off from Beaconing, where you can create location-based games easily, and it is called Play Visit. So this is an example of some of the different games which have been created. There's so many different examples that I can talk about, really. So the approach that we have done has been adapted in Malaysia, as you can see here. And it has also been featured in so many different press articles, as well as in terms of, the funders and the government, especially in the UK and in Malaysia, in how this approach has really impacted the classroom. And we always believe that teachers, educators, practitioners are the agents of change. For example, whatever that you are creating in digital media, right? There will be someone who is going to use it. There is someone who is going to access it or reuse it or adapt it. So we have to make sure that we understand who they are, because they are the ones who are going to make meaningful use of whatever that we create. So we have to ensure that we understand their needs as well. So this is important, as in terms of education, we need to upskill teachers, because upskilling of teachers is one of the most effective, tool that will be able to achieve the targets of the sustainable development goals, especially for education. So this is something that we strongly believe in. And community is key in whatever sectors that we are in. Creating a community of practitioners and experts, the industry, we have to ensure that they are supported, because this will basically provide the opportunity for everyone to work together, and it's very important. And space is another thing. Space is key. So how do we create a space that be more creative, a space that is more hybrid, include online hybrid interaction as well as physical interaction, which will also help us to respond to any restriction. For example, movement restriction, we have the online approach. We also have the physical approach that you can actually run in your own homes, on and so forth. So those are the things that we are interested in. And you can see the first gamification center in Malaysia, which has been set up and established. So just to quickly give an overview and just to end this particular talk, is think about the pathway of change and impact in everything you do, in terms of whatever research you're doing and in whatever digital media you are creating. Is thinking about the basis of your research, the basis of your approach. In this case, GameChangers for us, with international engagement, which has informed the work we're doing in Beaconing. I know that some of you are familiar with this particular project, which ended in 2019, and also another project, Creative Culture, that has impacted the marginalized community in Malaysia, which has also informed further work we are doing in Southeast Asia, which will improve resilience in terms of social resilience of communities, as well as young people in these different countries in Southeast Asia. So it is important for us to think about the pathway of impact. And one of the things that you can check out, School Education Gateway has also featured our approach in their, the way that I encourage teachers to improve their skills in using games for learning. And it is something that we strongly advise teachers to be involved in terms of working together as a community. So to end, I would like to emphasize the word experience. Think about experience when you are creating anything. You are creating solutions, that you are creating devices, digital media, digital platforms, so on and so forth. Think about the experience around that particular instrument that you are creating. And I think we will be able to impact better socially, human development, cultural development, so on and so forth. So with that, thank you very much. I think I've exceeded my time, but yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully that we can have a chat after this and see what our shared interests, if there are any questions. And if you are interested in the book, which as mentioned previously, you can see on the screen. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sylvester. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to monopolize this talk. So I'm going to perhaps ask you to stop sharing the screen, and hope that the audience also have a lot of questions. We have here a lot of PhD students and researchers in the area, so we have obviously a lot of questions. From the classroom? No?
Maria João? Não nos está a ouvir.
No.
É.
No questions.
Okay.
Okay. So perhaps I can start with a more global reflection and a question also. This learning versus gaming, it's a non-consensual couple, I should say. So how can we convince the traditional policies regarding education to include games in the classroom, and to upscale upskilling the teachers to be prepared to dominate some of this, because most of the students play much more games than the teachers. So the teachers doesn't know the awesome instrument that the games are. So how can we resolve this political issue for start?
Right, that is a very good question. Definitely something that we discovered in the earlier days of the work that we are doing, especially in terms of the adoption. The adoption has really been influenced by the prescribed curriculum, as well as the understanding of whether games for learning are mostly digital. So teachers are a bit scared that, oh, we can't actually use it because we need to make sure that it will address the curriculum, and we are not confident because our learners are much better gamers than us. And one thing that has really helped strike a chord with them is we didn't have to preach or tell them how important it is to use games. Okay, and say let's just play games. We brought some games, let's just play. And they were playing games for about 1 hour, and they were laughing, they were enjoying themselves, and they were learning things from that particular game. And we asked them to reflect on the experience, what is so important about it. So they talk about the emotional connection, they talk about the curiosity, they talk about team working, they talk about social connection, social interaction, and most importantly, they talk about the laughters. So they were enjoying each other, enjoying the activity. Yes. And we said, there you go. It's not about the game. It's not about the instrument. It's about the experience. Yes. Right? So when teachers start to realize that, oh yes, so it is important about how can we make an experience more engaging and meaningful. And then the next stage we ask them to do, now that you have played those games, can you change them into a game that you can actually use in your classroom? So we gave them about less than 2 hours. In 2 hours, they managed to create a prototype, a physical prototype of a game to teach specific lesson in science connected to the curriculum. Some of them creating math, some of them creating physics, so on and so forth. And then we said that, okay, now let's have lunch, and then you can try. No, before lunch they try each other's games and give feedback. And after lunch, we said that you invite your kids in. So there are students which were from primary and secondary school sort of like came in and then play the games with them. And some of them said that they have never been this engaging in the classroom in learning about this particular subject sort of thing. And in one of the games, it was a math game. The teacher created sort of like a memory game, but they changed it into a math game. But the person who was most engaged in that particular game was this kid who were never engaged in anything in that math subject that he's teaching. But he was the one who kept on shouting the answers, even though the answers were wrong. But you can see peer support. So his peer was trying to teach him how to do it. So the teacher would say, oh, this encouraged them to work together instead of them feeling uncomfortable because they don't actually know how to do it.
Yes.
Their peers were helping them. So that is the first part of the answer. So the importance of onboarding the teachers, because they are the ones who need to be convinced first.
Yes.
Right? And the second thing is, once you have that, it's easier to have conversation with policymakers. For example, in Malaysia, we have conversations with the local Department of Education. So we ran the workshops with the teachers who has gone through the process and with the policymakers, those who are actually doing STEM agenda in Malaysia. So they went through the experience and they could see the relevance of it and how important it is for teachers to be confident in being creative, because sometimes the things that you are creating might not be a game, but you are using the same aspects of games to create something useful and engaging with your classroom. For example, some of the teachers use the concept of missions and quests instead of homework 1, homework 2, homework 3. So they just change the terminologies they use in the classroom, and that really changed the way the learners engage with it. And it does take quite a long time to convince the policymaker, I must say. For example, the one that we have done in Malaysia, we worked with them from 2018, and now finally, just before the pandemic, the policymakers got very involved in putting as part of the policy in getting teachers to be trained. So we trained them online because we couldn't do it face to face. So now it's a process for the teacher to create the different games with young people. So the students are involved in the co-creation of those games as well. So it is important for young people to be involved in the process to give teachers more confidence, as well as the interaction between young people and students. So it is a long pathway to impact, but you need to convince teachers. Teachers are important. We need to understand them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have here one question. Nelson.
Okay. I was looking into your presentation that I liked very much. Thank you. I wanted to ask something that comes all the time with these projects and things that we do related with engagement and experience. That is, how can we measure this? How can we develop metrics to assure other people that we are doing a great work, that work that we believe in?
Yes.
When people want objectivity, and we speak all these things and we give all these.
Absolutely.
So give us a bit of your opinion on all that.
Right. I give an example. We've tried so many things to find the perfect. We have not found the perfect one yet, but the one we are using, of course, we use the mixed method approach in terms of using both quad and quant, but it's quite boring to talk about. But one thing that we discovered is we try to understand more about engagement from the playfulness perspective, as well as from self-efficacy, to try and understand motivation. So in terms of playfulness, there are two ways we are looking at the investigation of the engagement. The first one is trying to think about the aspects within that playfulness that we would wish to address in a particular game. For example, one is intrinsic motivation that is linked to autonomy. The other one is in terms of play direct, whether someone actually consider that as play, and autotelic aspect in terms of whether they are zone out when they are doing it. They don't think that they are in under pressure and whatnot. And there are a few others I can share with you anyway. And one of the interesting thing, the recent one, that when we evaluated the virtual escape rooms with the students, there some interesting insights where they are all zoned out when they were playing it. They said that they didn't think that it is work, they didn't think that it is an assignment, they didn't think that it is something to do with learning, but they are learning a lot of things through the other measures, of course, in terms of the learning, what they have learned and whatnot. However, when we ask questions about play direct, whether they consider it as play, different questions, the majority didn't think that it was play, so they didn't consider it as a game. But they are so engaged that they were very immersed in that experience. So the assumption for us is this is great, because the most important thing is the engagement part of it, the immersion part of it, and not really about whether something is a game, whether something is considered as play, because what we want to achieve by using that is to create an environment, an experience that would really immerse someone into something. And we find that so interesting. So we are going to do more investigation in terms of the connection with flow and the connection with whether in terms of self-determination theory, in terms of the need for competency, maybe it is connected to hard fun, because fun is divided into two main ones: easy fun and hard fun. Hard fun is very much connected to curiosity, the need to really improve your skills, because the challenge really excites you, because you really want to solve it. So the engagement itself in terms of the immersion is what we really try to explore.
We keep discussing about that, and people come, oh, but this is immersion. Well, but immersion is something that's very wide. It's a concept that is transformed in many different dimensions and possibilities. Thank you.
Many different measures out there, so many different tools. We just need to find consolidation of different ones that we can use in different ways, because we don't want to ask too many questions to students. We don't want to really spoil the experience.
Okay.
Thank you. So more questions? I have one. Another
all these
one.
People working in games and they don't want to put questions. What are you doing?
I'm very curious about a small map that you had in the slide, Path to Change and Impact, and you show the international engagement of the GameChangers project. And is most of the map is in black, and the parts in orange, which I deduce that is the part in the active empirical experience and grounded in practice, I suppose. It's North of America, I think Brazil and Europe, and perhaps Australia. Can you elaborate a little more about this international engagement? It's time, opportunity, or
Yeah, these are the one in orange, because I was trying to figure out when we launch it and then we run the engagement. Because when we first introduced GameChangers, it was supposed to be meant for internal use, supposed to be working with staff and students across the university, and suddenly it went mad. So everyone was interested in it. So we work with people from, for example, in the US, we are working with people from the Institute of Play. Unfortunately, Institute of Play is now shut. So we engage with them a lot. We engage with the MIT. We engage with random business industry community in Trinidad and Tobago. So we ran a lot of workshops with them, trying to understand more about the way that different communities and different culture sort of develop games. So that has informed into our knowledge bank, and also our colleagues in Australia. And so mostly in Europe, basically, it's like people that we are working with. So the branching inquiries that we have in terms of GameChangers, where we engage with so many different people, that has informed our work in trying to understand more about how do we practice this. And most of the time, we are working with the where I just call it quote unquote practitioner community, for example, from the industry, from education, from different sectors. It's all about ensuring that we onboard them in the simplest way. Because sometimes doing research, we tend to use words which are which are a bit too confusing for most people, right? So we need to ensure that we have that connection, the understanding, hence the word empathic, empathizing with what they do, and of course progressing to being compassionate to the needs, and being able to work together properly. So yeah, so that is where the international engagement comes from. So I'm sure if I do the map again, I think it'll be bigger than that. But that is where we started when everything sort of kicked off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we have time for one more question, 2 questions. No one?
I can ask a question. I was looking at these frameworks that you were building in learning versus gaming versus motivation, etc. But you work with students in very different scientific areas, right?
Yes.
And what can you tell us about the differences that you felt in these different scientific areas, in the ways that they used the games and the results that they achieved, or the different processes that, because if talking students in hard sciences or students in arts, they're very different. So what was your experience with this? And
experience is interesting. Is that when you, of course, when you work with students who are actually in computer science and engineering, the way they do things are very methodical. It's about creating software. It's about creating the platform that you want to create. We always want to bring them down to why are we creating this? Not just we want to use VR or we want to use this. Like, let's start from the beginning. It's like where do we go? That thing. And when we work with students from arts and design, when they are in a process with us, they are more interested in the humanities part of it. And it's quite, our approach is very much aligning with the arts and design way of thinking in terms of bringing things down back to earth. Let's think about why are we doing this? What is the meaning? What is the abstract and concrete meaning of what we are trying to do? And we sort of learn from them a lot, because my background is very computer science, and I learned from the experience that now I'm moving towards arts and design and humanities, and I myself is very transdisciplinary, learning so many different things. And we have also with health and science, health and life sciences, as you mentioned. And the transdisciplinary model that we created was very much around our engagement with the health and life sciences colleagues, especially those who are in psychology. So they were talking about sexual coercion, pressure, and how do we understand how do we create health intervention? Because the way that we do software is like, okay, you do this and you test it, you create the alpha version, the beta version, and then the final versions, so on and so forth. And then, but the health intervention is very different in terms of where I can say it's different yet similar in terms of the process, but they focus a lot more on how important it is to really know what we want to achieve and what we want to address, what we want to measure, the pathway to impact, the intervention is key. So we match that against the approach for learning mechanics and game mechanics. We want to understand the learning part of it, to understand how this learning can help health intervention and how we could actually be supported and enabled by that game approach that we introduced. And based on the colleagues who are in health and life sciences, when they were involved with us, that is what they really push in terms of, we have to make sure that we look at this as a medical and health outcomes, because we are changing people's lives, and we need to think about the importance of what is it that we are doing within that particular game, how it is used. So it makes us think about the rigor, because sometimes when we are doing things in terms of creating games, we like to experiment, try to say, oh, we want to try these new things and see whether it is going to be effective. We want high fidelity. So the first version that we did for that particular game, we were trying to create something that is like a proper role play game type thing. But when they look at it, and the teachers who were involved in the process, because they have to teach in the classroom, right? They said, this is not going to work. So we learned that it's not about how beautiful your game is, it's about the context of use. Hence, context matters, what we've learned from that experience. So the game ended up being quite low fidelity, but with high impact. So there is a balance there. If it is a game that you are trying to reach a mass market, of course you need the extra fidelity or the extra look and feel and aesthetics in order to attract people to buy the games. But when it comes to creating something for serious purposes, the practitioner as well as the target audience are the ones who are going to really inform, especially the aesthetic part of it, in terms of the look and feel and how it is going to fit with what they are trying to do. Of course, we'll try to challenge them to do something totally different, but that is a process that they will go through, learning from us and us learning from them. But yeah, but there will always be tension and conflicts. Different students or different colleagues who are in different disciplines we're working with, trying to speak to each other, different language. So we've learned that in order to be able to do that is to have conversations, making sure that we have shared common vision and understanding, and hence going back to the word empathic again. So being empathic to the actual process, not just the design process, but the process of engaging with whoever that you are going to deliver for. I think this is true for any discipline anyway, that if you are creating something for a client, right? So we need to understand more about the client. So I think that provides a good example for students who are involved in the process to understand more about how to empathize with a client, or how to empathize with the people they are working with. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that you were going towards that keyword on empathy, because it is key. It is key to do this multidisciplinary work. Yeah.
Social emotional skills, emotional intelligence. Those are the key things that everyone is talking about these days. It has always been there. It has always been important, but now that it is quite mainstream, everyone is talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here also.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I don't know if we have time for one more question.
If there's some last one, very brief, okay. Otherwise, we can end. It's already 3:02, but.
Just a final note. I think the question of Pedro Cardoso was very interesting, and the engagement and empathy with the final client. It's the keyword. But in this case, applying this methodology to different age of students, you have a different engagement, because the teenagers have one engagement, the children other one. It's a challenge always working in this specific case study in different schools or in the different target audience.
Exactly. One method that we use, I think it's quite common as well in UX design. We use something which is called the persona. So we're trying to understand specific group of students or target audience whom we're going to work with. So we try to sketch out what we understand about them. We would talk to them, we interview them, and we try to understand more about their interest, anything gaps. For example, if you want to make sure that the teachers are actually creating something for science education, for instance, we need to understand more about, from the students' perspective, what are the challenges. What would in a way help them to engage? What do they engage with currently? What is their normal school life type thing? So help us be able to understand it, because sometimes there are a few cases that students are not engaging because of personal issues. So it's not because the teaching in the classroom isn't good. It's because their family life is quite chaotic. So the emotional sort of distraction. So by doing that, teachers can help create different intervention for that support students. So I think persona investigation is quite interesting. It takes a lot of time, but if you can do with a few people, you roughly engage and know, and then you can always iteratively improve the game that you create in the classroom. As I said, practice makes better, not perfect.
Thank you so much for being here with us and gave this wonderful lecture. It was a pleasure to see you again. Thank you.
And it's a pleasure for me as well. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you to all the team and everyone who are here today. And then so if there are anything that you want to ask me, just email me. You can find me on your I think you can just search for my name, and then you can see the emails and Twitter, and
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sylvester. Thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you, Sylvester.
Bye, Maria João, and all the people in the room.
See you. Thank you.
Bye, Sylvester.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye, Anne.
Bye.